the first few slides while people are still getting on here. Oops. Alrighty, so just real quick, plug our next in-person meetup. As you guys probably already know, we do once a month webinars and then once a month meetups. And we love the meetups because it's always great to meet people in person and, kind of chat one-on-one. But the webinars are also great too because it's nice being in the comfort of your own home, or to also, kind of reference back to things that are recorded later. So anyways, but our next in-person meetup is all about apartments, how to analyze, find them, and finance them. And that is Wednesday, August 29th. I think that's like 2 weeks from today. Colin lives in Dallas, Texas, but he's been all over the place. He lived in Massachusetts for some time. He owns, I think, over 550 units. A small portfolio that him and his wife manage from Dallas that's in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is incredible. And he's also syndicated apartments. He was able to retire early at age 30 by investing. So he is coming in. That one I think is October 3rd. He is actually flying in from Dallas, going to spend a little bit of time here on the west side. I'm going to show him around to some of the projects that I have going on here. And then he is heading with us to Spokane. I think that's my next slide here. We have a Spokane networking and property tours group investing trip. And really how the group trips came about is myself and Dina, who works with me at Agents Invest. We are kind of the scouters of markets where you can get cash flow. And so anyways, we've been to like Detroit, we've been to places in Ohio, we've been to Nashville, Memphis, Indianapolis, Oklahoma City, Boise, Spokane, just a lot of different areas. And people started asking to come with us. And so we held our first one in Oklahoma City in July, and then our second one is coming up in Spokane. And it's a really fun weekend. I think, most importantly, just for the networking, it's always great to hang out with other people that are like you, right? That have a desire to build passive income streams, not be stuck in the rat race working 9 to 5 until you're, in your 60s. So it's really fun to meet other investors, to network, and then also get to know the city a little bit better. I personally love Spokane. I think it's just awesome. There's so much to do there. And the real estate is really affordable. And there's really some still great returns that we're achieving there. So anyways, that is October 5th through the 7th. And, I don't have a link to that. That one's not on Meetup. But if you guys are interested, we have, I think, just a few tickets left on that one. So definitely send me an email and I can get you all of the information. Are you there, Cody?
I'm here.
So Cody and I, like I said, we're going to kind of just keep this really casual and just have conversations like we do all the time, just almost like these little strategy sessions, because Cody and I have the same, values and mindset is truly, we just want to help you guys invest. If you've never heard me tell this story, Cody and I go back quite a few years. We used to bid against each other at the foreclosure auction. And it was always a lot of fun, but, with Cody, it's cool because, he buys properties, I buy properties. We're always looking at deals, and it's always fun to, kind of chat and strategize on these things. But yeah, Cody, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about you and what you do, and about your investments, and then also what you do with your lending.
Yeah, you bet. So yeah, Cody Touche. I run the Touche team at Caliber Home Loans. I've been in the lending industry for almost 19 years now. So time flies when you're having fun. Got serious about being more of a real estate investor when the market turned. Started doing some flips when 2007, 8, 9, 10 were around, and just as a way to keep busy and keep the income up. And then as the market started shifting more into a buy and hold market in 11, 12, 13, just started to accumulate more properties, was really clear that longer term, holding on to as many properties as I could would build greater wealth and obviously cash flow as well. The flips were great for $20 to $30,000 worth of profit on each one, but they were a lot of work. Then I had to pay a lot of taxes, and then once it was done and sold, it was gone. And then it was, you got to try to find another one and do it all over again. So holding on to rentals made a lot of sense for me. to be able to build up that passive cash flow. Over those years, I've now closed on an 18 unit in Oklahoma City a week and a half ago, and that brought my unit total up to 42 rental doors. Multi-family, so a lot of fourplex, triplex, 6-unit and an 18 unit. Most of that is all in the Northwest, so ranging from Auburn up to Marysville. And then just recently, again, an 18 unit in Oklahoma that is going to be, I think, a really great value and cash flow play as time goes by.
I'm still kind of kicking myself for letting you for giving that one to you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna claim that for years, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sometimes that's the case, right? Like there's still a few things at auction and you know, ones that I bought and then flipped and sold that I always wanted back, you know, that if you could just hold on to everything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I like you mentioned earlier, I love to find a creative solution and help people strategize both for immediate gratification of a transaction right now, and then as well as, you know, really planning ahead and taking all the right steps to building a great real estate future as well.
Awesome. And then, yeah, for those that don't know me, my name is Jennifer Beatles. Like Cody, I kind of got started, gosh, you know, I got started actually in 2007 and then really started to get pretty serious about investing in 2009. Same thing, kind of doing the fix and flip thing for a while, buying at auction, also building. So we did, you know, some spec building and for resale and same thing, you know, it was great to get a big chunk of money at once. And then the tax bill came and then you kind of realize it settled all out.
Yeah.
But the biggest difference really is, you know, with the rentals is, gosh, okay, sure, you know, it's a little, it's like comes in monthly chunks, right? But I mean, that's monthly, you know, income that comes in for as long as you own that property. And what I found, and Cody, I'm sure you agree with this too, but every year that I own these properties, the returns seem to get better. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, for one, it's you get to become a better operator the longer you
Yeah.
invest, right? You kind of learn through your transactions, you learn through your deals, and then, you know, the rents go up too, right? And you know, mortgage gets paid down. So yeah, so in 2016, well, I should say, so from 2009 to pretty much 2016, I was a real estate investment agent that was focusing on helping people buy in the Seattle area. And then we kind of, you know, faced this challenge of, you know, where cap rates were going and just the prices. And we just got kind of tired of, you know, paying just so much for these kind of fixer upper properties. And so I started looking for my clients in other areas. And I just said, look, you know, I think it makes sense to diversify. I think it makes sense to, you know, look at some other areas. I mean, certainly I can't help you in those areas, but what if I put a team together for you? And that was really the kind of the building of Agents Invest. Really what I do now is I put together investment teams in markets across the US that I feel like would be, you know, good investment areas, right? I mean, there has to be population growth and job growth and, you know, good price to rent ratios and things like that. But yeah, we've put together these investment teams and can really kind of help people wherever they want to buy. So, you know, people that still want to buy, you know, here in Western Washington, great, we can help you out. The cap rates aren't going to be what they are in, you know, markets like Spokane and Oklahoma City. You know, you can't buy a 18 unit apartment complex for $535,000 here. But anyways, yeah, so that's really my focus, my passion project, my, you know, new company or newer company is really, you know, helping people get their investment strategy in place, getting them connected with, you know, either Cody on the conventional side or, you know, Joe on the commercial side, and then putting deals together wherever it makes sense, whether it's, like I said, Western Washington or in these other areas. So, and then my husband and I own a small but very efficient portfolio, mostly in Western Washington, and then we're kind of going after some bigger apartments right now in Spokane and Oklahoma City. But yeah, so that is us. All right, so what's the first question we have? All right, guys, again, if it's okay, we're just going to be super casual and just dive into some of these questions. If you guys, again, if you've joined us after I've made this announcement way too many times, feel free to ask questions in that little chat box. I do have everyone on mute just because it gets super background noise and kind of annoying, hearing a lot of different background noise. So if you can ask any questions in the chat feature, I'm gonna, kind of dive into some of these with Cody, but then I'll be checking the chat feature and can kind of moderate as we go. But Cody, first financing tactic, number one advanced financing tactic is how can people get as many loans as possible? Like let's dive into that.
Yeah, you bet. This is one of my favorites because it's something that a lot of people don't think about when they're planning the purchase of their primary residence, and that's really where it starts, is with the primary residence. So if you've got if you're a single person, then it's pretty simple, right? You can have up to 10 financed properties. A financed property would be deemed a Fannie Mae Freddie Mac style loan on a 1 through 4 unit building, whether it be where you live as a primary residence or a duplex, triplex, fourplex as a rental. You get to have up to 10 of those financed for any one person. So again, a single person, pretty easy. The math is fairly simple. But for a married couple, it becomes a little more complicated because societal norms, when we take a mortgage application, usually people will apply together. So you've got a couple and they want to buy a house and they put on their application, I make X and my spouse makes Y, and together we want to qualify for Z, right? And so, and that's great. And that's a fine way to buy if you don't have any designs on being a landlord or wanting to own multiple pieces of property after the fact. But usually what we'll find is we have that conversation, and inside that conversation, people oftentimes say, well, I would like to invest in real estate and investigate that some more. So then that leads us down that hole of that conversation of the primary residence should be in the major breadwinner's name only if they qualify. And what I mean by that is, let's say we've got a husband and wife couple, and the wife is the major breadwinner, and the husband maybe has a small job that he's been doing for a couple years, but it's part-time, right? So he makes 20, 30 grand a year, and the wife makes 200 grand. So likelihood's good she could qualify for whatever house they wanted to buy. But if they put just the mortgage in just her name, that frees the husband up in this case to have good income and no big monthly debt on primary residence. And so as long as he doesn't have a whole lot of other debt, car loans, credit cards, that sort of thing, then he's got a great debt to income ratio on his own, right? So he doesn't have a lot of debt and he's got some income. And so that frees him up to be able to buy additional rental properties. Because if we're going to buy rental properties, we're hoping that we're going to buy cash flow positive rental properties from the get-go. And then now he's got that ability to use the income to offset any sort of negative or just moderate income from a new rental property, but doesn't have to offset that big primary mortgage.
So kind of in review, if you're buying separate as a married couple, you can get 20 loans. But if you're
That's
buying
correct.
together as a married couple, you're only going to be able to get 10 loans.
That's correct. And there's some variation in there, right? So I've got some folks where the husband and wife, or the two people, are on the mortgage for their primary residence, and if they both make a great salary, then they very well might both qualify for additional rental properties individually. But what most people will do when they first get started is, if they don't get the counsel on it and they don't recognize there is a limit, then they will just go gangbusters and buy properties as a couple. And if you do that and you buy each property as a couple, then each one hits each person's maximum of 10. And so if, let's say, they've already gone down that road and they've got a primary residence and 5 rental properties, well, now they've got 6 finance properties. They could buy 4 more together, or if they qualified, they could buy 4 more individually and be okay. It just depends if they qualify or not.
Sure. So a lot of times, yeah, we've kind of counseled people that were refinancing anyways to just put the
Yes.
primary residence in one of the spouse's name. You may
Yep.
not ever get to 20, but there's a point where maybe you will, or maybe you'd want that, ability to do that. I know, Cody, you and I have talked about that, so with my husband and I mean, we don't have, he has his own rental properties in his names and his
Yep.
name. And then, I have the primary residence and then our other rental properties in my name. And it's great. And it's actually, I think in some ways, and you might be able to say it too, is it's probably, easier. So when he, goes to get a mortgage, he doesn't have to, show all of the other stuff that are related to me. So
True.
it's great. It's nice.
Yeah, we have a real estate owned schedule, an REO schedule on the mortgage application, and when couples have lots of properties and they own them together, then each time individually they apply, we've got to list them all out there, and we've got to do a lot of extra due diligence. So if Travis were to apply, your husband were to apply, he doesn't have to disclose all of the properties that are in just your name, and so it makes his mortgage application that much easier too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So let's
Yep,
go
and
to the next.
to further that real quick too, we've got another client right now that both of them are working and making great money, but the wife in this case would like to step back from work, and so our idea is to get going on helping her buy some rental properties as quick as possible, so that when she does step back from work, she's actually has some income from the rental properties to help qualify going forward.
Right. Well, and that's actually a good point too. For anyone that I know a lot of the people that I've talked to, a lot of the investors, they all have the goal of kind of early retirement or replacing their income, with their W-2 income, with rental income. So I think it does make sense, for the spouse that's probably thinking about retiring early to load them up with their W-2. Although you bring up that point is they may qualify just fine with their rental income for the properties that they already own. If their debt to income ratio is low enough, they may continue to be able to just continue to buy even though they don't have the W-2.
Yep.
So let's talk about the people that have already hit their conventional max. So
Sure.
what then? What options are available for those people?
Well, yeah, there's several options there. One we're actually doing right now for a client is he's at 10, and he's got two properties that are very lightly leveraged, and we're going to refinance the two properties into one, and then one will become free and clear because we're going to completely pay off the mortgage on that note. So he still owns a single family residence that if it had a mortgage on it would qualify or count against him as a finance property. But by basically smashing those two mortgages together, then now he's got one loan on one property and one property that's become free and clear. That frees up another spot for him. That's an absolute possibility. Another great possibility there is to level up. You trade up, right? If you've got a property that you've held on to for a number of years and you've depreciated it quite a bit, and now maybe it's time to think about it doing an exchange, you can take one that you've got a lot of equity in and maybe not a lot of mortgage, and then trade up, right? You go from a single family or like I did this twice last year. I traded a condo for a fourplex and a condo for a triplex. So I was able to go from 2 units that were condos that were very, very lightly leveraged to highly leveraged four and triplex. So I got turned 2 into 7 units, and it didn't take up any more spots on my financing guidelines. So that's a good way to trade that out. Then you can go to portfolio, right? Portfolio for regular residential lending. Caliber offers that. There are a number of banks around town that offer that as well, where it doesn't get sold to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So there's a different set of guidelines. Now, anytime anything that's not saleable to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you're going to pay a premium for it, right? Because that's a loan that a bank's going to have to hold on their portfolio for a period of time. And they don't really like to have to do that. A lot of banks do like to hold loans on their portfolio, but they don't want to have to. And so because it's non-saleable, you'll pay a premium for that. Then alternatively, buying commercial, right? That's a good strategy as well. Trading up a single family, selling that, doing 1031 exchange, moving into a 5, 6, 7, 18 unit apartment complex. You take one off of your finance slot with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and move it into still a finance property, but now it's commercial, so it doesn't count against you.
The other thing too we should bring up is when we say Fannie and Freddie, we're also talking about VA and then also FHA loans that are counting against this max, right?
True. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Normal residential type financing we call it agency financing. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, USDA, those would all count against you.
Perfect. So Linda asked a really good question, and I don't really, have a slide for it, so I'm just going to ask it now. So Linda
Sure.
asked about financing for the auction. She said, what type of financing can I use to buy a townhouse in an auction? My intention is to use the townhouse as a rental.
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the type of auction. So if it's a county courthouse steps in Snohomish County, that would be 3,000 Rockefeller, and you go outside on a Friday and actually bid through the foreclosure process, then that needs to either be cash or hard money. So because you need to have a cashier's check at the time of the auction. If it's something like auction.com or an online auction, oftentimes those guys will give you 30 to 45 days to close on that transaction. You may have to put down some money, like almost like earnest money, some sort of deposit, but then you'll have 30 to 45 days to close it, and then you can get any type of normal type of financing to fulfill that after you've become the winning bidder.
Awesome. And then let's really just real quickly dive into the hard money loan. So let's say, Linda goes and gets a hard money loan, then, does that stay forever, or like walk us through how she gets out of that?
Sure, yeah, you bet. So the hard money loan is a really great solution for quick money. It is well used at auction. It's also great for a distressed property or an off-market property, that's been brought to you maybe by a wholesaler or needs a very quick closing and without maybe too much regard to the condition. Basically, hard money is private capital that is put together by either, it could be grandma and grandpa, it could be an institution or a local company that they will pre-approve you, and they will give you the money basically without too much due diligence on you or the property. That money is quite expensive. Normally, you're going to pay between 1% and 3% to borrow that money, and you're going to pay between probably 8.5% to 12% to borrow that money on an annual basis. So it's quite expensive. It's not money you'd want to have out for a long period of time. So we help people do this regularly, both with auction and with off-market properties. And what ends up happening is we like to have you pre-approved, pre-qualified, ready to go before you close. And then once you close, we hit the ground running with the normal mortgage process. So a normal conventional type loan process, where we do all the due diligence. We order a title report, we order an appraisal, we do all those sorts of things. Oftentimes with those, we are going through underwriting, getting title, doing everything, and then prepping, and we don't order the appraisal just yet because oftentimes those properties need a little bit of work. So you might need to do some general cleanup, you might need to do a total rehab before we appraise it. So depending upon the level of condition of the property, we've waited a couple of weeks to order that appraisal. We've waited a couple of months to order that appraisal, just depending on what needs to be done. But once that property is in great shape, the appraisal comes back. We use the new market value to do a rate and term refinance, and I'll jump into that in a minute. But as long as we're doing a rate and term refinance, then we can refinance that property right away and pay off the hard money and get that done and gone, so you're not paying big exorbitant interest rate over time, and get you back to a more normal type of process. Generally, that ends up costing you an extra between 3% and 5%, depending on how long you need to have it out. So what I always tell people is, inside of your spreadsheet, inside of your analysis of the property, make sure to build those fees in. And if the property works, great, go for it, go get it. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And so either you need to figure out a way to buy it with cheaper financing, or negotiate the price and get the price down a bit.
All right, so let's talk about people that have a lot of equity but don't maybe necessarily want to sell those properties. So how can we turn equity into cash flow?
You bet. So this is one of my favorite mechanisms too, because you're generating equity as time goes by, as you do repairs in the value or repairs in the property, and or raising rents, right? All of those things drive appreciation and drive more value in the property. The problem with it is we like to figure our cash on cash return when we buy a property, right? We like to figure our rate of return based on what we put into it. But as time goes by, you get more and more equity, so you have more and more capital in that property, even though you haven't necessarily put it there. So what ends up happening as time goes by, your return goes down, because your rents might raise a little bit, but the value of the property usually is raising quite a bit, especially in the market right now. So that creates what we call lazy equity, right? And so your equity is not actually working for you as hard as it was when you made that purchase. So it's great to be able to tap into that equity. There's a couple ways you can do that. One, you mentioned you could sell, right? So if you don't want to sell and do a 1031 exchange. If you don't want to sell, then you can do a couple different other solutions. That would be a cash out refinance, where you refinance the existing mortgage and pull out additional cash, usually that is 5% less in loan to value than whatever the purchase requirements are. So on a single family mortgage, generally speaking, the purchase money requirements are 80% loan to value. So you'd want to target a 75% loan to value on a single family cash out refi. With multifamily 2 through 4 units, generally speaking, you're looking at 25% down. So you'd want on a purchase. So you'd want to think about what's my loan size at a 70% loan to value. So, you know, a good example there is you bought a property for 300,000, put 20% down when you bought it. That's let's say it's 20% down, so that's a loan size of 240. Now that property's gone up in value over, say, 10 years to 500 grand. You've paid the mortgage down to, say, 220. So now there's $280,000 worth of equity in this property that's really not doing you a whole lot of good. You can come back and refinance that at maybe 75% of the top line total and free up $150,000 to go put to work and do something else. You can also do that through a line of credit. There's pros and cons with everything in life. The pros on the line of credit is it's great, quick money that is used for in and out of a deal, right? So if you've got a flip, or if you want to buy something, renovate it, and then come back and refinance it quickly, home equity lines of credit are great for that. If you're just looking to pull cash out and put it to work in a long-term asset, then I prefer a cash out refinance because you know what you've got. Most lines of credit are variable tied to prime, and every time the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, we all hear about it in the news, they're raising the Fed funds rate, which then in turn raises the prime rate, which then in turn raises your interest rate on your home equity line of credit. So I like to be able to know exactly what I'm getting into. So I would usually take a line of cash out refinance if I'm going to put money to work long term, and a HELOC or a home equity line of credit if I'm going to put that money to work where I can pay it back relatively quickly with maybe a BRRRR strategy.
Got it. And are you paying any taxes on that money?
You are not paying taxes on that money. Great question. There's no way to well, I mean, I guess there's ways, but as far as if you own the property and you eventually sell it, you're kicking the can down the road, right? You're getting that 150, $200,000 worth of equity out. You can go put it to work. You're not having a saleable taxable event though, so you're being able to harvest those funds with no tax penalty.
Yeah, that's something I was asked that once, and I was surprised because but it makes sense, right? I mean, because if you're putting in your pocket, say,
Yeah.
$150,000 on a cash out refinance,
Mm-hmm.
but that's tax free money, so it's kind of one of those things like, would you rather work how many ever hours it would take to make that money, or
Right.
potentially put that money to work, so long as everything still cash flows. I think that's one thing that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people miss, and could get them
Sure.
into trouble, right? If you're maxing out, treating all your houses like ATMs, like people had done in the past, and then
Yeah.
getting into negative cash flow situations. That's not necessarily what we're promoting here. But if you have properties where there's still a significant amount of equity, and you can take some of that and turn it into another property that's going to double down on your cash flow, then it could potentially make sense.
That's right.
So
Well, and the major difference there between 2006 and now is that you can't get 100% cash out on a non-owner occupied property, right? Generally speaking, you're going to be limited to 70 to 75% loan to value. So yes, you can get some of that equity, but you cannot take it all, right? Like there's just not a really good mechanism for getting everything out of it, or even to the point where if you were to need to sell the property, you couldn't get out from under, right? If you could do a non-owner occupied property to 90%, basically selling a property usually costs you around 10. So at a 90%, you're effectively still walking away with paying off your mortgage and not being in a mountain of trouble. The problem is if you go to 90 and then the market drops 20%, which I'm not making any forecasts or predictions, but if that were to happen, then you could be in trouble, right? And you could have over levered that property. But they have changed their lending guidelines to that, at least for now, that you cannot do that. You cannot get that high of a LTV or that high of leverage on a non-owner occupied property.
And rightfully so.
Absolutely, I
I
agree.
don't
Yep.
necessarily disagree with that. Yeah.
No, right. It's responsible lending, and I hope we stick to it.
So let's talk about how to structure a BRRRR deal. Now it's kind of interesting because I never realized it, but I was kind of structuring my BRRRRs a little different than what other people were. I guess more of the traditional route because I wasn't actually putting any money down. I was kind of cross collateralizing either equity or bank accounts. But maybe let's cover that. Let's talk about some of the seasoning, the difference between a cash out and a rate and term on a BRRRR, and then really just kind of the different options for structuring that.
Yeah, you bet. So to take it one step back, BRRRR would stand for buy, renovate, rent, and refinance. I like to add one more R on the end, and that's repeat, because if you do it right, you can recycle your capital and do it over and over again with the similar money. It does take getting the right kind of deal, right? And you really need to be able to be a good deal hunter and do great repairs and get an extra amount of equity that you've built in based on the work that you do. So yeah, so the way that I like to structure the BRRRR deal is like Jennifer mentioned, is to either cross collateralize something where you're giving an equity interest in another property, or having some money on deposit with a hard money lender. That's the best route to go. Generally speaking, you can get 100% finance loan against a new piece of property, but what happens there is there's another piece of collateral, so another building, or like Jen mentioned, a savings account, or even just a cash deposit. So that's the way I usually do it, is I put down a cash security deposit for 20% of the purchase price of the new building, and then I get 100% loan. The major reason for that is now when I go to do my refinance, once the property's all fixed up and looking good and rented up, I'm paying off a purchase money loan that can make that new loan considered rate and term. If I had put down my down payment and got a 80% loan to value loan, and then I wanted to get my down payment back, that would be considered a cash out refinance, which is totally doable, but it requires 6 months seasoning from the date of title transfer to the start of the new refinance. So what that means is I would have to be in my hard money for 6 months. And if I paid 2 points and 12% per year, then 6 months in a hard money deal is going to cost me 8% of my purchase price. That's going to be too rich for me to really make sense of that deal. So instead, I do the security deposit, and then once I've paid off my 100% loan with the hard money folks, they don't need my deposit anymore, or I can transfer that deposit to the next project, whichever I prefer.
Got it. And then Cecilia actually asked a really good question, and I think it actually does kind of apply to what we're talking here. So the cash reserves. So talk about the differences in cash reserves that an investor needs to have, specifically as they're getting more and more properties.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it has changed recently in the past years, or probably 18 months or so. Generally speaking, there used to be a reserve requirement of between 2, 6 to maybe 12 months, depending upon credit score, loan to value, and purpose of your transaction. Now the guidelines are quite a bit more different, and we really have to run the deal through the approval engine. So both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have approval engines. They're called DU and LP, Desktop Underwriter and Loan Prospector, I think is what they call the LP. Anyways, those systems are basically approval engines. We put in your credit report, we put in your income, your assets, that calculates debt to income ratio, we put in the deal, we put in the address, and it spits out at the end the type of reserves that we need to have. And so that number is growing. And so, it's generally speaking going to be some number of months based on the number of properties you have and the total PITI, or principal, interest, tax, and insurance. So the total payments on all of your properties, and that's going to add up. And the last time that I did one, my reserve requirement was just about $100,000. So I had to, what that means is inside of the deal, I needed to have enough money for my closing costs, for my down payment, and about 100 grand left over after the deal was said and done. Now, the benefit there is you are able to count, and now keep in mind, I've got 42 rental doors, and I'm on my 9th finance property, and I've got a fair amount of payments. But that number can be accounted for in a number of ways. It can be cash in the bank, it can be retirement accounts, it can be stock accounts, it can be anything that's liquid or semi-liquid investments. It cannot be real estate equity, right? So that's an important thing to know. If you do need extra reserves and you pull out money from like a home equity line of credit, get that in the bank and get it seasoned, that can count. Available balance on a home equity line of credit does not count as those reserves.
All right, so back on real quick, kind of going back to the BRRRR, only because I've had a couple of people ask me this is, they had family members that wanted to, kind of earn hard money terms, right, or interest, right, on lending some money out, and then they planned on, kind of owning the property for a year and then refinancing their family. So, what would be the requirements like on your end if you were refinancing kind of a family member note?
Yeah, that's considered a non-institutional mortgage, and so you would have to be able to prove that you've made the payments to it. Generally speaking, if it's institutional, we can just get a payoff statement and a 12-month payment history from Rain City, Veristone Capital, wherever the institution would be. If it's non-institutional and we're looking at, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, somebody like that, then we would have to show canceled checks, 12 months canceled checks to show that the mortgage has always been paid on time. If it's a shorter term than that, then we still are going to need those canceled checks. And then we just need to have a copy of the note so that we can verify the terms and make sure that everything is copacetic. It's great to have that in an LLC or some other entity to remove necessarily the connection. But that said, as long as we have those payment histories, I think we're going to be just fine.
Perfect. So as long as people make payments to their family members and have a recorded note, they are potentially good to go.
Yep. The IRS has some rules about surrounding that on interest rate, and I don't believe that it's too onerous as far as what they need you to charge, but there is a required minimum interest rate on that type of a deal. Now, granted, if grandma and grandpa want to be hard money lender, then there's probably not going to be any issue. But I did have an instance where a mom and a dad they didn't want to gift the money, they wanted to do a loan, but they wanted to do a zero interest loan, and their CPA said that wouldn't work. So
got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about delayed financing. So what is it, and then what's the seasoning, and how does it work?
Yeah, perfect segue from the last topic, because another great way to do a BRRRR is with cash, right? So if you've got enough cash in the bank and you want to do it that way, or if you've got big home equity line of credit that you say, well, geez, I don't want to pay those hard money fees, I'd rather just use my money and then pay cash for the whole thing and come back and refinance it. You can absolutely do that. That's a real sound way to do it, and can save a lot of money that way. And so if you've got a property that you own free and clear in cash, the only limitation there is we can be able to do a cash out refinance limited to the value of what you paid for it, plus any improvements for the first 6 months. After 6 months, then we can use current market value.
Perfect. By appraisal, right?
By appraisal, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And then where does the line of credit, would that be considered delayed financing, or where would, if somebody used an entire balance of a line of credit to acquire a property, would that fall under delayed?
Yeah, it would still fall under delayed because the property in and of itself doesn't have a recorded mortgage against it. So we would be we'd be doing a cash out refinance on a free and clear property. Even though we are paying off a note on a different property, it's not connected. So it would still be considered delayed, even if you had a line of credit that you'd pulled from to buy that property.
Okay. And then this is also another good question. I don't have a slide on it, but let's talk about, as I'm sure everyone knows, when you're getting conventional loans, which is, the topic we're talking about today, 1 to 4 units, you have to put the loan in your personal name. Though oftentimes people, I get asked this question all the time, okay, so how do I get it in an LLC? Can I do that? Is there a due on sale clause? Of course, we're not attorneys here giving legal advice, but do you want to touch on that topic real quick?
Yeah, you bet. So from a mortgage perspective, there was a due on sale clause that if you did do that, it could trigger the note and the mortgage company could come calling. Now, the mortgage company never did come calling unless you missed some payments, and then they, of course, want to be paid. But they changed that rule January of 2017. So it's been about a year and a half, and as long as the ownership doesn't change, it's not a problem. And so what I mean by that is If husband and wife buy a property and they move it into an LLC that's held by husband and wife, there's no ownership change. Now, if I buy a property and move it into a LLC that Jen Beatles owns 99% of and Cody Touche owns 1% of, now we have an ownership change and there's going to be an issue. So, yeah, so I mean, that's kind of the short answer there is if, as long as the ownership is remaining the same, there will not be any sort of due on sale clause and it's no problem. That said, LLC is just a whole nother topic, right? And I have personally chosen not to hold my properties in LLCs. I know probably about 50-50 of the investors that I work with hold them either in LLCs or the other 50, and that's the 50 that I'm in, we carry big umbrella policies. So it's certainly to each his own, and something you should talk with an attorney and a CPA about, of whether or not which route best fits for you. The cons on the LLC for me was separate reporting, separate banking accounts, the fact that I would need to have in order to properly preserve, I would have to have separate ones for each one of my properties in order really to give me maximum protection. And just the expense and the hassle of maintaining all those LLCs for me personally wasn't worth it. I just carry a big umbrella policy to cover the gains or to cover the mitigate the loss. Totally up to you. Just, I would say investigate it and see what's right for you. That said, if you want a vanilla flavored Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mortgage, you're going to have to buy the property in your own name, and then you can immediately transfer it out and there won't be any due on sale.
Perfect. Yeah. And actually, there's a really good follow-up question to this. And again, I see this a lot too, is can you buy a property in an LLC using a hard money loan and then refinance into a conventional loan in the same LLC?
Yes and no. You can buy a property with a hard money loan in an LLC. They have no qualms about that. But when you're ready to refinance into conventional conforming, you need to move it back into your own personal name, refinance, complete that, and then the following day you can put it into your LLC, back into your LLC.
Yeah, and same thing if you refinance any conventional loan, right? If you've
Yep.
bought it personally, put it in an LLC, and then 2, 5, whatever years down the road, you want to refinance it. Sometimes people get annoyed by that, and they, are told, well, hey, nope, you got to put it back in your personal name, complete the refinance, and then put it back again. So, so there's definitely, some steps in doing that. And you've got to make a trip to the excise counter as well, because they want to, look at any potential tax collection opportunities there when you're doing these deed transfers. So sure. And then it probably, it doesn't also, break chain of title either, right? If it's the same ownership. Because I think that's the biggest thing is if it's the same, then you're probably okay. But, if it's not the same, then you run into, in the state of Washington, potential excise tax payment. And then another question, if the LLC is owned 50-50, provided that you're just adding the spouse that you're married to, because Washington's a community property state, I think, potentially you'd be okay. But yeah, if you're adding, someone that, is not your spouse, then again, that could trigger excise and you're adding people to the mortgage. I've actually had, quite a few people say something, they're doing kind of partnership things and they're going to quit claim into an LLC after the fact with their partner, but switch loans. And to me, that's risky business.
That is risky, and that brings that sparks something for me that I think I meant to say earlier on. I want to make sure we drive home is that if let's say you buy a property in your own name and you want to move it into an LLC that's owned by you and your spouse. Now your spouse's name is going to be connected on title to that property, and even though the spouse is not on the mortgage, that property is financed. If they're on title and they're not on the mortgage, it still counts against them as one of their finance slots.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm glad actually we talked about that.
So a lot of times people will think they can get around, because the number one issue there is people want to have protection, right? I want to be on title, right? I want to be on title to this property. If I'm going to do it as a partner or I'm doing this with my spouse, I want everybody on title just for protection. Well, that's fine, and you can do that. But by putting someone on title, you are taking up another slot on their 10. And so the better route to do that with is with a will or a trust agreement or any number of legal instruments that can connect the dots there. If it's a matter of, I had this happen one time where it was a matter of a parent and they didn't want to be on the mortgage, but they wanted to, and they were contributing to the transaction and they wanted some security. I had them file a lien. So they just recorded a lien for the amount of money that they needed to protect. Now that person, the kiddo, has the property. They're the sole owner of the property and they have a mortgage on that property. But before they can sell it, they have to get a payoff from dad, right? And so if dad's going to be notified if they're going to sell this property, and he's going to have a say in what happens with that property. So there's other ways around it. There's ways to protect that don't mean putting into an LLC with more people than are actually on the original title or original loan.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Or definitely, if that's something that, really needs to or has to be done, then, go a portfolio route, and it's going to be, a little bit more expensive on that route. But any, partner
Right.
that owns less than 20% on a portfolio loan typically doesn't have to personally guarantee. So, anyways, that's getting down a funny trail on that. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think the biggest thing, though, as the point of bringing it all up is to have a plan in place and talk to the people, ask the questions up front before you just go and do things. That I think that's the biggest thing that we're, kind of trying to drive home here is just be careful. Sometimes we read things online or we hear things on a, podcast. Here we are on a webinar talking about this stuff. But I think the biggest thing is, I love getting all these different ideas and strategies from different places and from different people. And then it's just a matter of, making sure that you understand the red tape and all the, the things like that, with the people you're actually going to be working with. Kind of last question, wrapping up the LLC transfer deal is it true that you just do a quick claim? Is that a title change? So yes and no, it's not just a quick claim deed. I personally don't prefer to do quick claim deeds. I have a great attorney who for like $200 will do a warranty deed for me. And then you have to also do an excise tax affidavit utilizing the proper exemption so that you don't have to pay excise tax. You have to actually get the deed stamped by the little excise lady, who are usually not very friendly, and pay them $10, to do their paperwork before you can actually record it. But I don't know. I know a lot of people use quitclaim deeds. I've used them before. But I think that a deed is a deed as long as it's done properly and you have the proper legal. But you do have to use that excise affidavit online. It's like 5 pages, and then fill out all the information, and then make sure that again you utilize the exemption to not have to pay the 1.78% tax in the state of Washington. Anything to add on that, Cody?
Nope, I think you nailed it.
Okay, cool. All righty, moving on. But your questions, you guys are just awesome. Thank you. So, every question is just great. So, all right, well, let's talk about house hacking. So, what options are available for someone who's just maybe starting out, or maybe, gosh, they, already own a property, but they want to get into the house hacking side of things? Talk to us about that. What are the options?
Yeah, so generally speaking, with house hacking, that is, and this is a term that I've stolen from the Bigger Pockets folks, but it's just basically obtaining a residence where you live there and other folks do too, and they offset your mortgage payment, right? So that can be any number of things, right? You could buy a single family residence and rent out 3 out of a 4-bedroom house, and you live in one and rent out the other 3 bedrooms to buddies, and they, between the 3 of them, they're paying your mortgage payment. You're living for free, right? That can be a great way to go. From a mortgage perspective, that doesn't really help you much, so you'd have to be able to qualify for the entire house. A more useful house hacking strategy that we use for folks that maybe don't quite qualify for what they'd like in a single family residence is to look at a duplex. So inside of a duplex, you can rent out 1 unit and live in the other unit, and we get to bring in 75% of the rent off of the second unit to help qualify. Now, I've had a client that's done this, and then she actually ended up taking on a roommate in her section of the duplex as well. And between the rents from side B and the rents from her roommate, she actually made a few bucks to live in that property. That works great. FHA is a fantastic route to go for house hacking, but it does require owner occupancy in the 1 through 4 category. And so in order to do that, you'd have to live in one of the 4 units, and then you could buy duplex, triplex, or fourplex and rent out the other sides and help offset the monthly mortgage expense, and help yourself qualify. There are actually, I just put together this kind of multifamily house hacking style cheat sheet with all of the loan products that we've got and all the restrictions and how you can fit into those guidelines, because conventional also has some rules and some ways to do this as well. But in order to go minimum down, you need to limit it to duplex, right? So one or two units, 5% down, you can do this really great. But you go to 3 or 4, doesn't mean you can't owner occupy a conventional 3 or 4 unit, but the minimum down is 15%, and it's so cost prohibitive. It usually basically boils down to 20% down for a triplex or fourplex with conventional.
So what about someone? Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. What about someone that owns a single family residence? They want to turn that into a rental, and then they want to house hack to another owner occupant residence, a duplex. Can they do that?
Mm-hmm. It depends. So if we're talking FHA, there's some pretty strict rules about how that works. If you're relocating to a new market area, you can use an FHA loan to buy another property. But generally speaking, that's 100 miles away. So if you already live in Linwood and you want to buy a place in South Everett, then that's probably not going to work with FHA. There are some other products that don't limit a home ownership, that you could own another piece of property. We have a new one out that is 5% down, up to 4 units, but it has to be jumbo, which is not hard to do in our marketplace. Just means it's a loan size over 453,100. So if you wanted to buy an owner-occupied fourplex in Linwood, of course the loan's going to be over that number, and it's 5% down. You just have to have a 740 credit score for that.
Cool. And then if somebody wanted,
go ahead.
If somebody wanted to, let's say, house hack once a year, can they do that?
Yeah, you can. It depends on how the numbers all shake out, right? So as long as the properties are cash flowing well and we're following the program guidelines, then yes, they can. They can keep doing that. It's best if you absolutely 100% have moved in and didn't apply for at least 12 months. That's kind of the rule. A lot of times people that want to do this, they get a little aggressive and they want to start doing it at month 10 or apply a little early and then get going on it. It's really best to wait the full 12 months because there's a lot of fraud around occupancy, and lenders have really peaked up their ears in this and they're looking out for it.
Yeah, I've had people tell me that. They're like, oh, I'm going to buy this as an owner occupant. I'm never going to move in though. I'm just going to, have my mail sent there. And that's a big no-no. I mean,
it is a big no-no.
Yeah, it's just not worth it,
it's
guys.
Mortgage fraud, right? It's mortgage fraud. You may not get caught, but if you do, the penalties are harsh. And it really, I mean, if you look at this as a business, it affects your ability to continue to do this as a business, because once you've got a hit on your credit record and your CABR's report as someone's been found guilty of loan fraud, then good luck getting another loan down the road.
Right. So let's quickly, as people are buying more rental properties, right? Adding more, husband and wife are kind of taking turns. Talk to us about how that could affect their DTI, and then, why does that matter?
Yeah, sure. So the first question there, what is DTI? And so DTI is an industry, we have a lot of lingo in our industry for sure. DTI is just simply debt to income ratio. So we take all your monthly debts, credit cards, car loans, student loans, mortgages, and then divide that by your income, and then that's a certain ratio, right? And so different programs require different ratios. Generally speaking, a good rule of thumb there is 45%. So 45% of your gross monthly income can go to offset your expenses. So car loans, credit cards, student loans, mortgages, and that includes the new one, right? And so if we're buying new rental property though, the benefit for buying new rental property is we do have income that goes there to offset that. So, you know, let's say the new mortgage payment on a rental property is $2,000. It's a duplex and it rents for $1,500 a side, right? That's a pretty good deal. So you got $3,000 worth of income coming in. Now I can't give you credit for all of it right away. We've got to discount that by 25%. But now we've got, let's see, oh man, it's getting late. My brain's shutting down. But let's say that's so $2,250 to offset that mortgage payment. You've got a $2,000 mortgage payment, and you've got $2,250 to offset it. You know, now you're cash flow positive on that property from day one, and it's actually not a negative look at your debt to income ratio. It's positive. So why it matters is at certain levels of debt to income ratio, no matter how strong you are in other ways, you just won't get approved, right? So if your debt to income ratio for a conventional loan product purchase is over 45%, the answer may be no. They do have categories where the higher credit scores, the more down payment, the less risky the loan in a lot of other ways. They can stretch that up to 50%, but generally speaking, no conventional loan is going to approve over 50%.
So basically, don't go buy a bunch of rental properties, improve your debt to income ratio, and then go get some super expensive cars and a house on the lake. Because I've seen that happen.
And then try to do it more. Yeah, and that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean that's very true. And you know, car loans can be the biggest culprit because their criteria for lending is far different than mortgage. So if you want to buy a number of properties and a car, you're way better off to get your properties purchased and then go get your car versus vice versa. I've seen car loans stop real estate transactions for sure.
Yeah, a lot of times I've told people, you know, just to refinance them, right? I mean, it's not ideal to drag that payment out longer, but at least short term it
Yeah.
improves the debt to income ratio until you can pay that thing off. So
yeah, it's
there's
true.
good debt and
Yeah,
there's bad debt, and auto loans are not so good. All right, so we talked about owning multiple rentals affecting DTI. So we actually kind of covered this, options for down payment. So we talked about cash out refinances. We talked about line of credits, you know, a lot of those different things. So I think we kind of covered that. So questions? Yeah.
One thing to note on the down payment, and not so much as a viable source, but a non-allowable source, and that's going to be gift, right? So no gift funds are allowed inside of a rental or non-owner occupied property transaction. And the interesting thing about that is we all kind of understand what gift funds might look like, but what you might not think about is if someone is on the title and they're not on the mortgage and they want to provide the money for the down payment, technically that's called gift funds. Even though they are on ownership of the property, they're not on the mortgage, they're not a mortgagee, it's technically gift funds. So what we have to do in that instance is we've got to season it, right? So the money needs to go into a joint account or into the purchaser's account and season it for 60 days, and then it becomes their money.
Cool. So we're going to open it up for questions from you guys. One question, I know this webinar is all about 1 to 4 unit conventional loans, but Linda has a question about portfolio loans and how to use them. I mean, I guess I can talk about, so I've used portfolio loans. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds, right? So you can talk about construction loans, you can talk about just straight up portfolio loans, but portfolio loans are loans that local banks hold on to. So like Cody had mentioned previously, right? So Cody works with Caliber Home Loans. Caliber Home Loans does the loan and then they sell it off to Fannie Freddie, you know, basically the government backed loans. But portfolio loans, local banks just hold on to them. And so in order for them to just hold on to them, they can't sell them, you know, off to the government. You know, they have to charge a little bit more. There's some benefits and downsides to them, right? So downside is, you know, I have a couple of portfolio loans with Coastal Community Bank. And as Cody had mentioned before, interest rate is tied to prime. So on occasion, I'll get a little letter from them saying that, you know, my line of credit rate has gone up or, you know, whatever. So that's a potential downside. And then oftentimes they're 25-year amortization. Everything that Cody does is 30-year amortization. So it just makes the payment a little bit lower, you know, on a monthly basis. And then, but the benefits of the portfolio loans is you can buy them straight in an LLC, depending on your relationship with the bank. Like Cody just got a sweet deal on a portfolio loan from US Bank on his 18 unit that we've been talking about. You know, no loan fees. They flew out a bank employee for the appraisal. You just an easy thing to do. So
Those
I
hidden
guess if
costs.
you're
Yeah.
yeah, if you're a self-employed person, or you just have a really funky situation, I think that portfolio loans may be an option for you. Though I guess to point out, if you can qualify regularly with a Cody, it's going to be a lot cheaper. On the interest rate's going to be much better. You're going to get that 30-year fixed rate that you're not going to have to get those letters in the mail saying your interest rate has gone up, or what have
Yeah.
you. I mean, it's pretty much what you get is what you get when you start. Anything to add on portfolio loans, Cody?
Yeah, so a couple things there. We always would love to take the first look at that before you go and commit to a portfolio, just because it is quite a bit more expensive and a lot more variable, and you're just, it's not as safe and secure as a vanilla flavored mortgage. And even if you think you might not qualify, we'd love to take a look at it and see, because we have a number of outlets, one, and two, maybe we can find a creative solution that fits you into the box. And three, if we don't, then I can tell you what it's going to take to get you there, right? And that's the thing, right? You might need your first couple to be portfolio, but if we properly set them up and do the right things, either credit-wise or income-wise, then you get back to the point where you can use it more like a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan and save a lot of money. Caliber also has a number of portfolio products where we actually do sit on these on this paper, and one of them is specifically designed for investors. If you're already over your 10 finance properties, we have mortgages that will allow you to buy. I think our exposure on that is no more than $2 million or 5 loans beyond. So if you have 10 already, we can get you to 15 as long as the total loan sizes are under $2 million.
Got it. And then sometimes too, like I know some flippers and builders, that they utilize portfolio loans, and then, once they've got either certificate of occupancy or they've kind of got the property turned back around, then of course you can always refinance a portfolio loan into a conventional loan with Cody. Just again, if it's in an LLC, you've got to put it back in your name and do some of that stuff. But yeah, I think, there's a lot of flexibility there. You're kind of paying for that. But really the best terms are, on the conventional side.
One of the things that I would say, just as a general add-on to the topic, is oftentimes people will get emotionally wrapped up in an interest rate or a set of fees or something like that. And my counsel there is to take that out, take the emotion out of it and put it on the spreadsheet and see if it works. And if it works and you get the rate of return you want, then the fees and the rate really doesn't matter, right? Obviously, we all want to get the best possible rate and pay as little as possible in fees. But if you have a funky project, or you are a funky borrower, or whatever, right? You have some sort of situation that's outside the norm and it's going to cost more, then just evaluate it from a pure numbers perspective, right? We've had those instances where we had somebody that was short. They had a short sale, and it was only 3.5 years ago, and they wanted to buy a piece of property. And the interest, because of their short sale, their interest rate was quite a bit higher. And initially, the initial response was, "Oh no, I would never pay that kind of an interest rate. I'll just stop. I'll just not buy this house." And so we, I understand that emotion, and we took it back and said, well, let's look at this logically, right? If we're gonna wait, let's see it, let's say it's gonna, and in this case, I think it was a year. So let's say we're gonna wait a year. The market was super hot and interest rates were on the rise a little bit. I said, what do you think you'd have to buy this house for a year from now? Well, X number, right? Okay, great. So if we divide that out by 12, that's how many thousands of dollars per month, right? And it was 5 times the amount of the extra interest on the mortgage loan that I proposed. And so instead, they took the emotion out, looked at just the logic, just the numbers, and made a smart decision. And then what ended up happening is rates went up a little, rates went down a little, property values went up a bunch, and then a year later we refinanced, and everybody was super happy. So just again, I'd say look at just the numbers rather than the emotions that might surround a interest rate in the 6s or 7s, as opposed to something in the 4s or 5s.
Yeah, and I think just another little thing to kind of talk about interest rates. I mean, sometimes, Cody, you and I have talked about, paying a small kind of upfront fee to kind of buy down the interest rate because you're locking it in for 30 years anyway. And a lot of
Yeah.
times what I look at is like, okay, if it's going to cost me whatever, $600 to get down sometimes, you can even, if the pricing is really good, we can get down a quarter point. And that's also a write-off, right? So any loan fees
Yeah.
that you have from a property that you put into your portfolio, those are all write-offs. And same
Hmm.
thing, on the hard money side, right? I mean, I've had people that are like, gosh, I can't believe you would pay those hard money fees, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, first off, there's, opportunity cost to that, right? I get to acquire a
Hmm.
property that I can put in my portfolio and have no money into the deal. So of course I'm going to pay, who cares, 10 grand or whatever to do that. That's all going to be rolled in anyways. And then, number two is I can capitalize all those expenses in the year that if I can do it all in the same year and refinance, through Cody, then that loan is paid off. I get all of those write-offs in that same year. And then they're going to, Cody's loan fees or whatever would amortize, over the life of the loan or, what have you. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tax strategy to this. I mean, certainly, like I said, we're not, CPAs, but I think if you guys start thinking about that, like who do I need on my team to get the best financing, to find the best properties, pay the least amount of taxes, and live the life I want to live. That's really kind of what we're promoting here, right? So a lot of times I own a business, right? And I there was a point where I was getting a lot of loans at once, and so I would have my CPA do a draft, and I'd send it over to Cody, the loan officer, and say, hey, if I file my taxes like this, is this going to affect my ability to get future loans based on the write-offs that I want to take? So again, I think the more proactive you guys can be in having the right people on your team, talking about these different strategies that are very specific to you, then you're definitely going to be much further ahead than investors that are frustrated, that they've wrote an offer in an LLC and can't get a conventional loan in that way, things like that don't have the strategy before they go into these properties. So yeah, that's really what we're here for. What Cody and I are here for is we're here for you guys to help add value from our years and years and hundreds and of properties and deals, and things like that. And we can just help you guys kind of get steered in the right direction. And then some of them, of course, you're going to talk to your CPA and your attorney about making sure that those ends are buttoned up. But yeah, that's kind of what I have on that on that ending, unless you guys have any other questions about anything. Anything to add on that, Cody?
No, I think so. I think that's it. Like the CPA is a really key piece for sure. That's two of the most important things I think about real estate are appreciation and depreciation. And depreciation is probably the most overlooked piece. And why you mentioned earlier, if somebody's got a lot of equity in a property and doesn't want to sell it, I would really counsel them to take a look at that, because having a lot of equity in a property sounds like a great thing on the surface, but what that means is your cost basis is way lower than what it could be if you recycled that money into a new piece of property, right? So if you have $500,000 worth of equity in an $800,000 piece of property, your acquisition cost is probably in the threes or maybe fours, and you've depreciated it for 5, 6, 7, 10 years. You've depreciated it down quite a bit. You're not taking full advantage of the tax law to be able to earn a great income on it and pay very little to no taxes. So that's a great CPA sit down meeting. If your CPA doesn't understand that, I would say talk to a few more.
Yeah. And I mean, there could be something to be said too for right now doing some cash out refinances while values are high to get
Yeah,
ready for whatever comes next. I mean, who knows? But get
we've
ready
got
for the next deal, or as some people say, sit on cash for the next recession or whatever. But yeah, values are good right now, rates are good. So that's definitely something that I'm contemplating in my mind is should I be, doing some more cash out refinances right now to just have on hand for whatever comes next. So
I personally executed on 3 home equity line of credits, 2 on a rental and 1 on my primary, just in the last 3-4 months. And
yeah,
I've got a couple of smart clients that are doing very similar. They're either pulling cash out or they're getting big lines of credit so that they're prepped and ready. The interesting thing about the line of credit though is if we do have a little market correction, they can shut those down.
Yep.
So a line of credit can be shut off, whereas if you do a cash out refinance, that cash is in the bank and it's ready to go. A lot of folks will get, again, a little emotional about having that cash on hand and cash in the bank, and that it costs them money, right? So you do a cash out refinance, you pull out 200 grand from a piece of property, it's probably going to cost you $900 a month in extra payment, and that's maybe going to cost you, I don't know, maybe $800 of that is going to interest, right? So that's $800 extra in interest that you're paying every month. But, if that gives you the opportunity to go and make a play at a property that you weren't going to otherwise buy, or, you sit on that for 6 to 12 months, and then when there is a market correction and you can pick up a piece of property at a 10 to 15% discount, imagine how much extra money that's put into your net worth versus just letting that sit there, and then the market corrects, and then now you can't get it out, right? And that's the tough part, is if the market corrects, that means lending guidelines are probably going to tighten up a little bit, and loan to values are going to get lower and lower, because your value is going to be affected by the overall market. So I would say get those lines and cash out refinances established now.
Yeah. Well, so many people, they weren't able to take advantage of the prices in, 2009 to 2013 for those reasons.
Yeah.
So cash on hand is good for recessions. If and well, I shouldn't say if, but when it comes, who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
So, alrighty, guys. Well, thank you so much for spending your evening with Cody and I, listening to
Yeah.
us
Thanks,
just kind of
everybody.
throw across some of these fun things that we talk about quite often, related to client and the questions we get. So thank you guys so much. It means a lot to me that you guys are here spending your evening with us. So thank you for that. And that's it. That's our show. So if you guys have any other further questions, feel free. You can always email me, Jennifer@agentsinvest.com. And I should have put a slide here with Cody's information, but I'll include that in the recap email that I always send out. So thank you guys. Have a good night. And we hope to see you on the 29th in person. So, all right, guys, have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.